Well, welcome everybody to our event, My Life, My Business. Wish I was here. As usual, we talk about all kinds of topics that help us all to actually live a life of purpose, but to live a life that we enjoy. And today I'm going to complete the final chapter on the business nuggets from a Novice Biker series. And today, what I want to discuss is just life during recovery as the conclusion to this series. And I want to launch straight in. If you really want to listen to where I started with the series, as well as all the weeks up until this one, you feel free to either listen to the playbacks on Clubhouse, or you can access all the edited recordings on the Mufasa Coaching Practice YouTube channel. So, without further ado, Chapter 6: Life During Recovery. Just want to talk about, and I've alluded to this previously, the physical rehabilitation that I had to go through. And what I want to start off is just a recap on what the orthopedic surgeon told me after they reconstructed my knee with all kinds of metal work. And he was so pleased with this that it was such a work of art. But the only guarantee that he wanted to give me was 9 months. He said, it will take 9 months. I'll be able to get around, but he could guarantee that I'm going to need knee replacement surgery. A year later, he removed the steel in the leg, however, and it was quite an interesting journey when he did. But as I was going to see him during my recovery period, he had a look at everything, and he was he was so impressed with his work of art that he declared, "Oh, I surpassed myself. I now am going to remove the metal in your leg." What followed after the day I spent in hospital during recovery is I picked up a major infection, kind of poisoned my bloodstream temporarily, and I was allergic to most types of foods, including vitamins. In the next 2 to 3 months after that particular surgery, I was rushed to emergency room where they had to give me all kinds of injections because of the allergic reaction. So my throat closed up. So they needed to be quite drastic in what they needed to do. So it's interesting. So I had to stay away from most foods. I had no idea what was triggering all of this. So that was just the saga after something so positive, you know. No knee replacement surgery, no metal in the leg, because when I had the metal in the leg, I set off all kinds of alarms. It was quite funny. But very much part of the recovery was initial physiotherapy and going through the motions of all kinds of things that were prescribed. And I think my thoughts during that whole period was, even though such an inconvenience and such a painful, uncomfortable period, this was all reconstructive. It was all going to help me to be able to walk again. So while I was on crutches, I used to go for physiotherapy. And as soon as that swapped over, it was biokinetics. And I spent 4 years in biokinetics. So initially twice a week, and then for the last 2 years of the 4, just once a week. And I had quite an interesting journey during biokinetics. Number one, I had to rebuild trust in my leg. All I could imagine was this leg would not hold my weight and all kinds of things like that. So I very gingerly would put a weight on the leg. So the whole process had to help me overcome the limitation of my thought process. so that I can learn to trust it again. I mean, the biokineticist used to tell me, listen, this leg is now a bionic leg. It is much stronger than the other. But by then, I've learned to slouch in a different way, overcompensate how I was standing, causing all kinds of other problems and pain, muscle pain and so forth, and putting undue stress on my one leg. And he had to prove to me through maybe the first 6 month period that I could actually stand on this leg. And as I think about that, it was an amazing time of rediscovering that belief and having faith that when I lifted the one leg up and stood on this one, so I mean I was standing on all kinds of interesting things for balance and so forth. But and also while I was rebuilding the trust in my legs again, so that I could at least reduce the limp, I was also embracing the adage, no pain, no gain. I always remember when I started biokinetics, the first 2 or 3 months. By now, I was driving a motor vehicle, and I was still on crutches. And when I would get to my destination, the day following biokinetics, I would literally, the one time, I fell out of my motor vehicle, trying to get out of the seat because of the pain caused by these sessions. And so, in the first year, my biokineticist got my knee to bend at least to a 90-degree angle. And I don't know if you would believe me, it took me a further 3 years to bend my leg to a further 5%. Because that was the difference between walking normally and being able to run. But that small little change, just a 5-degree shift in how my leg was able to bend, turned. So by now I was walking very confidently, but to be able to run. And when that day happened, I'll never forget, I was running on a treadmill and I couldn't believe the sight in the mirror that I was facing when I saw finally I got to that point. But it took me 4 years to get there. And together with the physiotherapy, the biokinetics, and also the pronouncement initially, pessimistic view of the orthopedic surgeon, it's been 14 years and I'm still walking with my original leg without replacing the knee, and sometimes running. And I sometimes run, and I can run a K or two if I really wanted to. And so that was all necessary. And I think the adage is, when you are hurt physically, certainly you go through rehabilitation, but at the same time, to Shanaaz's point last week, there's also the mental, the spiritual rehabilitation that needs to take place. And you need to combine the two, because you might be physically healed, but mentally you might still believe as if you are crippled. And so there's the physical crippling, and then there's the crippling of the mind. And so one of the things that I made a promise to myself to was, to overcome that crippling of the mind, I needed to expand my mindset. And for me, it was really embarking on international travel to the United States of America. And I just wanted to share, the first experience that I had. And hopefully, as you're listening to this, it's this deep particularly, but it's my story. It's my testimony. Excuse me. I remember I got on a flight, and it was an 18-hour flight from Johannesburg into the US. And obviously there was a connecting flight, and I was going to Fort Worth, Texas. So I had to go via Atlanta. So it was 18 hours to Atlanta, and another, I think 2 hours. Can't even remember properly, but about 2 hours to Fort Worth, Texas. So what was interesting um, was I had a different type of growth when I disembarked from that flight in Atlanta. My knee was about 3 times its size, swollen, even though I had pressure socks on, even though I had a brace on. And it was quite interesting. And suddenly walking was extremely painful. And this was only a year after my accident, literally. And I arrived, eventually in Fort Worth, Texas, and the conference, and it was an ICF conference, International Coach Federation conference, and it was its 15th year celebration, is started just the following day. So I didn't have enough time to actually recover. And I remember how excruciatingly painful it was standing. Walking, no problem. Standing in one place. And people were coming up to me during the conference and saying, "Hi, I saw you across the room and I saw how, you look so friendly and you're smiling all the time." And on the inside, I felt I was actually grimacing. But anyway, I met a lot of fantastic people over there, both from America, but from the US and also from Southeast Asia and Asia. Um, but while I was there, in terms of the extracurricular activities, the one day I felt that because I was so overcompensating with this swollen knee, etc. I developed plantar fasciitis, and excruciating. My tendon became inflamed in my right leg, so it made it even worse. So looked like I needed my crutches. I didn't have them, so I decided, it's the only way to break through my limitations, because at that stage I would walk. The furthest I would walk in one go would be about a kilometer. On this particular day, I decided that I was going to try 3 kilometers because that's what the sign said. Little did I realize, it was actually 3 miles, which was over 5 kilometers. So I walked for 5 kilometers. But what was interesting, when I pushed through that boundary, when I realized I actually walked 4 kilometers more than what I've ever done, the art of the possible, the limiting belief kicked in. And it's amazing. Suddenly, even though I paid the physical price for doing so, I had to take a taxi back home to my hotel. But being able to break through that barrier physically also released my mindset. And that is so important. When you start believing you can't do something and you begin to shrink within your limitations, you actually have to deliberately decide to push the boundary as much as you possibly can. You got to push through it and make your mind believe that you can. Right? Shift that limiting belief. Begin to believe, because suddenly it's no longer what you can't do, it's what you can do. And so I had a fantastic time, and I came back eventually. And for me, it was an extremely successful conference, because I went to that conference with a lot of issues that I was dealing with at the time. I was dealing with leadership issues within the company that I was in, that I partly owned. I had partners, and for some reason, this company was not growing in a way it needed to. And so, what was the solution that I was looking for? And I couldn't find the solution while I was still in South Africa. And I tell you, when I got beyond the boundaries of my limitations, my physical limitations, by flying out of the country, it set my mind free, because I came back with some very clear ideas and next steps to execute, and I executed them. And the moral of that story, and we don't have time to really go into it, the moral of that story is came back, executed the plans. Up until that stage, the company wasn't doing too well. After I executed them, became sole owner of the company, and as well as the sole director. it suddenly seemed to open up the favor and the doors of opportunity that we've been knocking on for so long. And we landed some big contracts. Now these things were in the pipeline, but it could have been coincidence. But I'm just thinking that the timing was just about right. And sometimes, you need to get out of your situation that you're in, and get that bird's eye view. And whatever it takes to get a bird's eye view of your situation, for me, it was to get out of the country, to face my physical limitations in a different place. And you could say, but you could have done it in South Africa. But yes, but I was in a familiar territory in South Africa, in a comfort zone, and therefore was not pushed to try anything new. And I think sometimes we push ourselves when we're in unfamiliar territory out of sheer necessity, because there's so much unknown. And so have the courage to face that unknown. And so for me, it just worked out with a clear thought process, with understanding partners and fellow directors. We were able to clinch the deal and still remain friends. So the impact on the coaching practice was amazing. And for the next 18 months, in fact, nearly two and a half, 3 years, hit a purple patch. And it was so liberating. And, as always, I would think back to that decision that I made, that I was going to travel and face my limiting beliefs and set my mind free. And the impact, in terms of how I was interacting with my clients, is that I understood the Pareto principle in a new way. And the Pareto principle is just, identifying what requires 20% effort for an 80% outcome. For me, was understanding that a 5% gain in the little changes that we need to make will increase your speed 4 times. So if we're talking about efficiencies, the pushing through something that seems and people would always say, whether you're in a race, etc., is that last 5%, in terms of closing a deal, finishing a project, the last yards seem to be the hardest before you cross the finish line. And yes, but in my case, I just want to say is it actually speaks into that adage of being able to accelerate around corners as a biker. But a 5% gain equals 4 times the speed in my case, for where I could only walk with 90% ability. With a further 5%, I could actually run 4 times as fast in the way I was moving. I learned how to be patient. I learned how to celebrate the small gain every half a degree. Every time it was measured, learn to celebrate it, to stand. And we've spoken about celebrating your achievements, and that point is that all this effort, this pain, is all worthwhile. To push through it, because even that small incremental shift pushes you into that place where you become more proficient. Right? Suddenly, you take off. Because there's no real suddenlies. Every time we think, and we speak about overnight success, I'm telling you, it's not. It is pushing through in that last 5%, and you suddenly start soaring. And I want to say is, whatever you're facing, if you've done and you think you've done enough, keep going. The breakthrough is literally around the corner. And then you can also stand back and say, I've achieved overnight success. And, and then patience, really being patient. I promise that if you're patient and you persevere, you will reap the benefit and eat the fruit of that effort. And so whatever the goal is that you've set for yourself, especially when you're recovering from a setback, don't stop. And in the last podcast that we did, we actually said you need to keep going, and rather than let your circumstances, your environment be the barrier to your progress, push through. if that's the bend that you're encountering, we also spoke about it, look beyond the bend and keep going. And then, something that I just want to coin a phrase that I stepped out of my mindset cage. I kind of imprisoned myself initially until one day I noticed, just as I was reflecting on where I found myself, I looked and I was in this cage, but then I saw that the key to the cage door was on the inside of the cage. So it was within my ability to unlock the cage, step through it, and find new freedom. And this has certainly impacted in a way I engage with my clients, is be able to say, well, you're in a gilded cage, but you walked in there and you've locked yourself in there. Just look carefully at the door. The key is in the door on your side. Have the courage to turn the key and walk out to freedom. And faith is manifested in this way: is have a vision, have that positive expectation of the future, and do not let go of it. Only align yourself with beliefs that serve your purposes, that serve the kind of confidence that you require, and the upbeat spirit that you need to have. You need to embrace the enthusiasm of waking up in the morning and doing everything that you can towards achieving that goal. But you got to have rock solid belief that you will get to your goal as long as you keep going. And that will introduce a tenacity, that never say die attitude, that, you fall off the bike, you pick yourself up if you can, and if you can't, like in my case, and you have to go through all of the 4 years of rehabilitation to eventually begin to run again. But this time, as I explained last time, I was riding my bike again and overcome my fear and starting to enjoy it amazingly so. Is I just want to leave you with this thought: is never give up, never give in. Hold fast onto the vision that you know has been deposited into you. It's yours. Don't let go of it. Keep going. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow, thank you. That was so inspiring. I've been had a number of things going through my head in terms of my own wanting to do a 10K. So anyway, that's another story for another day. But yeah, I know completely. I actually said in one of my comments, I said, I wish I need to forward this podcast, this particular one, to a couple of friends of mine. So yeah, I think that there was such a lot in there. Jacques, thank you so much, and been very inspired. I think for me personally, what applies to me is that your absolute patience in the 4 years. I mean, it took you 4 years, and I think that perseverance is kind of what caught my attention, as well as the building trust, in yourself again, and the shifting the limiting beliefs. So I think that there was quite a lot in this chapter, and you probably could have like expanded on some of them. Like, when I think of themes, there's
Yes.
some of the themes you could, that in itself like has a whole chapter on itself. So, but yeah, I've been very inspired, and going to think about some of the things you mentioned. I think for me personally, it's around the patience that, it's taking 4 years, and you didn't like, immediately start running. So, yeah. The other thing that also stood out for me was this gift that traveling gives us when you are privileged to travel, how it absolutely changes the mindset. And my mom we often used to get like, we get so annoyed with our parents. I used to get like, my mom used to take groups of people to Israel because she had a lovely contact there. And then she would spend, she and a friend would spend lots of time having meetings on Sundays with the group of people. I could never understand it. until I realized, Shanaaz, but you being so privileged again, you travel. A lot of the people haven't traveled. And you know what, for them, what it's about, my mom would always tell them, now, if you manage to save that amount of money for Israel, think of all the other things that have become possible. And literally, because some of them, the first time they've traveled abroad, the first time they've saved so much money, it literally opened doors to their mind in terms of what is possible in addition to the actual travel. So, I mean, just amazing, and really inspiring. I'm going to have to think about what I talk about next week. But yeah, thank you so much for that. It's really inspiring.
Oh, no, excellent. What a pleasure. And yes, and I mean, as usual, you summed it up so well. And no further comments required. And yes, there's nuggets in all of it, and it's been actually quite a blessing in a way to just share the story. You know, just tell it as a testimony, and it's been very good for me. You know, to do so.
Yeah,
So
I'm not sure about all the pain you went through. I'm like, when you said no pain, no gain, I'm like, I'm my pain threshold is very low. So I'm like, no, I can't do too much pain. I'll do so. I'll have to work on that one as well.
yes, it's also worthwhile. So, thank you very much, Shanaaz, and thank you, Julia. And for those listening, once again, take one thing that inspires you from when you listen to either Shanaaz or myself talk, and change something radical in your own life. We can all do it as long as we put our minds to it. So, thank you very much. Until we chat again. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.